Hello and welcome and namaste from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Newshour. I'm Gautam Roy. Coming up over the next 1 hour. India is all set to host Vladimir Putin for India-Russia bilateral summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Putin does not want peace in Ukraine, say NATO foreign ministers, as Moscow denies rejecting US peace plan. The European Commission moves twin proposals for borrowing and using frozen Russian central bank assets to support Ukraine's finances. And India's Operation Sagar Bandhu continues. Emergency medical aid arrives in Sri Lanka after Cyclone Ditwah. Russian President Vladimir Putin will arrive in India on Thursday for a high-stakes two-day state visit, his first since 2021. He'll join Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit, aimed at taking the bilateral partnership to a qualitatively new height. Ahead of the visit, security has been tightened across the capital for this pivotal summit. DD India's Rabindra Chauhan has the details.
Ahead of his high-stake two-day state visit to India, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday that Moscow aims to elevate cooperation with India to a qualitatively new level with deeper economic engagement.
We aim to elevate cooperation with the People's Republic of China and the Republic of India to a qualitatively new level by strengthening its technological component. We have numerous joint projects in energy, industry, space, agriculture and other sectors. We will also discuss these topics in detail during the upcoming visit to India with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, including increasing imports of Indian goods to our market.
Cooperation between India and Russia spans various key sectors like defense, trade, energy, nuclear energy, space, science and technology, culture and education. The two-day visit will include bilateral talks and a business forum focused on trade, energy, defense, space and agriculture.
This is the 23rd summit. That means both the sides at every level have invested a great deal of political capital in taking it forward. I still remember that when he had come here in December 2021, at that time, the conflict had not started, but the tensions around Ukraine were going on. And Mr. Putin was on Indian soil for barely 4 hours. But still, he invested that much of time, effort, energy to come, basically to send out a message that this relationship is very important for Russia.
India and Russia share a long-standing trusted partnership elevated to a special and privileged strategic partnership in 2010. This year's summit will review the full range of bilateral cooperation. Defense ties remain an important area in the bilateral relations, with joint R&D and cooperation under Make in India. Both sides also coordinate closely on multilateral forums like the UN, G20, BRICS and SCO. India advocates reform in the SCO, including designating English as an official working language, while SCO regional anti-terrorist structure continues to be crucial in counter-terrorism cooperation. Government-to-government ties remain strong with frequent leader-level meetings and phone calls. Regular ministerial visits reflect sustained momentum in bilateral relations. Putin's visit is being viewed positively across party lines in India, with opposition leaders also welcoming it with optimism. Congress leader Shashi Tharoor said the visit is extremely important.
We talked for a long time about strategic autonomy. We have to preserve our negotiating space. For us, we cannot mortgage our autonomy to any other country's interests. We have to have independent relationships with all these countries. And Russia is an old relationship, it's a serious relationship, it's a strong relationship, and one where obviously we have very many fundamental interests at stake. So I think we will have to see this relationship, how it moves after this visit, but it's a very important visit for our country.
The enthusiasm of President Putin's visit to India is also visible on the artistic landscape. An artist in New Delhi has prepared a portrait of President Putin alongside images of India's present and past prime ministers, symbolic of a strong and enduring friendship between the two countries. Ahead of the high-profile visit, security agencies are on high alert with an extensive security grid deployed across the national capital, covering all routes and engagements. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, joining us live now to tell us a bit more about this key foreign visit to Delhi is PTI's Vinay Shukla from Moscow. Well, hi Vinay, how are you? This visit is being billed as good evening. It's being billed as one which will strengthen ties between old friends in new ways in Delhi. How is it being seen in Moscow?
In Moscow, there is also too much interest. I have never seen so much interest. Yes, but at this time, interest is great because there were people here, and there was the propaganda that India is pro-American, they will ditch Russia and all that. And the way India has been conducting its policy independently on all the things, it has impressed a lot of Russians who were skeptical of India. So this way, it's really interesting.
All right. And when at the same time, other world capitals, particularly Washington, Beijing, Brussels, Kyiv, and even Islamabad, would be watching what happens in Delhi very closely. Now, how are the leaders likely to address issues like conflict and other global challenges together, keeping that in mind?
Well, the problem of Ukraine has been explained by the Russian ambassador in Times of India today, his article. And he is given the real root causes. And the main thing, the Russians know that Trump administration, whatever you can call him, but has understood the reason behind it. It was the Obama's policy, and after this American Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland, after this coup in Ukraine, she was leaving, and she leaked conversation, told the ambassador in Kyiv, for EU, 4-letter words. So this is how things are coming. It was always there, and Russia has been trying to convince the administration to get involved in all these, removing all the problems here. So I think, one thing is interesting, that in China during SCO summit, Putin in his car, 40-50 minutes, he talked to Prime Minister Modi about this, what transpired after his talks with Trump in Alaska. So it's very important that there is so much trust, and India has, of course, is against war. The Prime Minister said, this is not the year of war, but his message actually was not only for Putin, but it was for Europe and other conflicting parties. So I think, and this time, he's coming after his latest round of talks with the US envoys here, and I think Prime Minister Modi will be the first foreign leader to get a briefing from him, first-hand briefing on what transpired and what are the issues there. And I hope that India can, through its very wide spectrum of political ties with different powers, will be able to somehow reconcile these differences. So this is the idea is here. The people are thinking that maybe it is possible, because Russians are also tired of war, because a lot of people are dying there, both sides, and they say that this is the thing when Europe wants to finish the Slavonic race, that is Ukrainian and Russians are of the same race, in fact. It's like Bihari and UP people. So that is why interest is there, right? And I hope India will give certainly its political backing, and other thing is there. So expectations are high here also.
Right. Vinay, thank you so much for joining us and talking about it from Moscow. Vinay Shukla of the PTI. Now, Russia has denied rejecting the US-Ukraine peace proposal outright after a 5-hour Kremlin meeting between Putin and his team, and Trump's negotiators failed to produce a breakthrough to end the conflict. Both the sides have tried to give an impression of making progress in face of extreme differences, with room for more engagement to sort all issues out. This has caused frustration in the White House, prompting the US president to call it a mess. But Russia looks ready to talk endlessly as long as it keeps building on its recent successes in the battlefield.
Five hours of talks extending from Tuesday into Wednesday between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US negotiator Steve Witkoff and US President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner in Moscow did not produce a breakthrough Ukraine peace deal.
The conversation was very useful, constructive and very meaningful. It lasted not for 5 minutes but for 5 hours. Naturally, we discussed with US colleagues the content of those drafts, those documents which the Americans submitted to Moscow some time ago. We went through these documents. We did not discuss any specific formulas, any specific American proposals. We could agree with certain things, and the president confirmed this to his interlocutors. We criticized some things, and the president did not hide a critical, even negative attitude to a number of proposals.
Just before the meeting, Putin said changes proposed by Kiev and Europe to a US-backed draft peace plan were unacceptable. He even sounded out a warning to Europe.
We are not planning to fight Europe. I've said this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly decides to wage war against us and starts it, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about that. The question is, if Europe starts a war with us, I believe that very quickly. This is not Ukraine. With Ukraine, we act in a surgical, careful way. You understand, right? It is not war in the full modern sense of the word. If Europe chooses to start a war, the situation can very quickly reach a point where there will be no one left for us to negotiate with.
While Tuesday's talks were underway, Trump told his cabinet in Washington that the conflict had not been easy to resolve, describing it as a mess.
As you know, we have a problem with a war that our people are trying to settle now with Russia and Ukraine. We are not involved in the war monetarily anymore. Biden gave away $350 billion like it was candy. That's a massive amount of money. And much of it in cash, a lot of it in equipment. I don't give away anything. We sell the equipment to NATO. The European nations pay us for the equipment, 100% price. And then they bring it to Ukraine or whatever they do with it. But we're trying to get that settled. I've settled 8 wars. This would be the 9th.
But hours later, both the Russians and the Americans were at pains to explain that progress was made on some fronts and more back and forth will be required on others.
The direct exchange of opinions took place yesterday for the first time. Yesterday, something was accepted, something was rejected as unacceptable. It is a normal working process in the search of compromise. We highly value Trump's political will to continue finding a resolution for Ukraine's peace settlement. Of course, we are grateful to Trump's administration for these efforts. We are all ready to meet as many times as needed to reach a peaceful settlement.
What they're literally fighting over now is about 30 to 50 kilometer space in the 20% of the Donetsk region that remains. And so what we have tried to do, and I think have made some progress, is figure out what can the Ukrainians live with that gives them security guarantees for the future. They're never going to be invaded again.
But the US Secretary of State was tellingly missing from the group photo of NATO foreign ministers in Brussels on Wednesday, where they had a meeting centered on Ukraine and defense issues. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was quick off the blocks on social media to announce his top negotiator Rustem Umerov will hold talks with the EU in Brussels before preparing for another round of talks with Donald Trump's envoys. Wednesday also brought forth the European Council's legally binding agreement with the European Parliament on phasing out Russian gas imports by 2027 as part of an effort to end dependency on Russian energy. Tussle over territory remains the biggest sticking point, as this footage surfacing on Tuesday also shows. Verified by Reuters, it has a couple of Russian soldiers waving the Russian flag on top of a building at the entrance of Pokrovsk, the Donbass logistics hub, which Russia claims to have taken, with Ukraine saying it's still being fought over. Russia wants Ukraine to give up all of Donbass as part of a peace deal, and Kiev remains unwilling to consider it despite losing ground in the region, almost inch by inch as the fighting drags on. Gautam Roy's report for DD India.
Now, the European Commission on Wednesday put forward twin proposals for borrowing and using immobilized Russian central bank assets to help cover Ukraine's financial needs for 2026-27. The EU executive said its set of 5 legal proposals include a reparations loan based on Russian assets largely held in Belgium and a prohibition on transferring these immobilized or frozen assets back to Russia. Talking to the media, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the proposals takes account of almost all of Belgium's concerns, with strong safeguards in place to protect member states and reduce risks.
Today we are proposing to cover 2/3 of Ukraine's financing needs for the next 2 years. So this is 90 billion euros. The remainder would be for international partners to cover. We have listened very carefully to Belgium's concerns, and we have taken almost all of them into account in our proposal that is today on the table of the reparations loans. We have very strong safeguards in place to protect member states and to reduce the risks as much as possible.
And still to come on DD India Newshour. Protesters mark martial law anniversary in Seoul with calls to dismantle rebellion forces. Amnesty International calls for a war crimes investigation in Sudan. And President Frank Walter Steinmeier on a first ever UK visit in 27 years by a German head of state.
So our episode is on accountability more than just an apology text.
Yep.
We didn't get one, did we?
If no British politician has the courage to issue an apology, get somebody from the royal family to do it, because after all, everything was done in the name of the crown. No one likes to be told that in their family tree there are a lot of skeletons. They have never allowed themselves to confront the horrors of their past, so I'm sorry to say we never got the apology. There is not just amnesia on the part of the British, the colonizers, but there is some forgetfulness or ignorance on the part of the rest of us too.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Newshour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, tensions between the United States and Venezuela have sharply escalated after U.S. military build-up in the Caribbean and a renewed pressure campaign by the Trump administration. U.S. lawmakers have voiced concern over what they call an unchecked campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. On Tuesday, Senators Tim Kaine, Chuck Schumer, Adam Schiff and Rand Paul warned that unauthorized military action would be a dangerous and unacceptable step. Meanwhile, Panama and the United States have carried out a joint training exercise in the Caribbean. The exercise brought together 25 Panamanian personnel from the National Police, Air Naval Service and Border Service, along with 25 U.S. Marines, according to media reports. U.S. troops have carried out at least 21 strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and Pacific since early September, killing at least 83 people as President Trump escalates a military buildup against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's government. In fact, now a Colombian fisherman's family has taken the American government to court over the issue. This fisherman was killed in a boat strike that took place. It's been taken to a US rights body. Cuba's electric grid, in fact, we'll come to that story a little later. Let's now tell you what's been happening in South Korea, where hundreds of supporters of ousted South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol rallied in Seoul, and they were demanding that a lot of these rebellion forces be taken back. Hundreds of supporters of ousted South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol rallied in Seoul on the anniversary of his 3rd of December 2024 declaration of martial law, which suspended civilian rule for the first time in over 40 years and triggered nationwide protests and a parliamentary standoff. Meanwhile, current leader Lee Jae-myung marked the anniversary by praising South Korea's unique and special democracy, highlighting its tradition of peaceful civic action and resilience.
대한민국 민주주의에 독특함이 있다. 특징이 있다고 생각합니다. 그게 뭐냐면
I believe that there is something unique and special about South Korean democracy. That's the peaceful and beautiful directness fueled by collective intelligence. I believe it has the characteristic of not delegating responsibility but taking action directly, acting peacefully and beautifully without violence, and never giving up.
그리고 포기하지 않는다. 그런 특성이 있다고.
Now, Amnesty International has called for a war crimes investigation in Sudan after reports of mass atrocities by the Rapid Support Forces in Darfur. The country's civil war, now in its 3rd year, has killed tens of thousands and uprooted millions. DD India's Adamya Mishra brings us this report.
In a report released on Wednesday, human rights NGO Amnesty International called for a war crime investigation into an assault carried out earlier this year by Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces in North Darfur. The war in Sudan broke out in April 2023 as a power struggle between Sudanese military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF. 2.5 years in, the war in Sudan has killed tens of thousands of people and displaced nearly 12 million. In late October, RSF captured the city of El Fasher, the army's last stronghold in the western Darfur region. United Nations says that RSF committed ethnically targeted massacres and gang rapes in the region.
None of us should be surprised by reports that since the RSF took control of El Fasher, there have been mass killings of civilians, ethnically targeted executions, sexual violence, including gang rape.
In the past week, United States Africa envoy Massad Boulos had called for the warring parties in Sudan to accept a ceasefire proposal without seeking preconditions. However, it was rejected by both parties.
We have appealed and we have asked repeatedly the two parties to accept this humanitarian truce as presented without any preconditions.
RSF has historic links to ethnic killings. The group traces its origins back to the John Jaweed, a predominantly Arab militia accused of genocide in Darfur 2 decades ago.
A lot of that violence reminds us of what we saw 20 years ago in Darfur, ethnic connotation of this violence, and the modalities of the violence, again, remind us of what we all condemned and said never again 20 years ago.
As the conflict deepens, analysts warn that Sudan is now effectively partitioned, a fractured nation that may prove difficult to reunify. For civilians caught up in the conflict, the situation remains dire, with no clear end to the war in sight. Adamya Mishra's report for DD India.
Britain's King Charles III and Queen Camilla welcomed Germany's President Frank-Walter Steinmeier at Windsor. Steinmeier is the first German president to get a state visit in the UK in 27 years. The visit will feature a state banquet at Windsor Castle and a speech in Parliament, underscoring renewed London-Berlin ties strengthened by a deepening security alliance after years of strain in the post-Brexit era. Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants recovered a hostage body in Gaza's Beit Lahia on Wednesday to hand over to Israel, pushing forward US President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. The Hamas said it would hand over the hostage body after Israeli forensic services concluded that remains returned a day earlier were not from one of the two final deceased hostages. Al-Quds Brigade said it located the body during a joint search with the Red Cross in northern Gaza, though it did not confirm the identity. The handover is seen as a key step towards advancing negotiations in the long-running conflict. Sri Lankan President Anura Kumar Dissanayake has thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi for quick assistance under the Sagar Bandhu initiative. Dissanayake on X said, and I quote, "India's prompt assistance under Sagar Bandhu initiative underscores the depth of our partnership and the enduring goodwill between our nations." India has significantly expanded its humanitarian aid under Operation Sagar Bandhu, deploying air, sea and ground assets to support relief efforts. India has sent a rapidly deployable field hospital along with over 73 medical personnel to provide urgently required healthcare support in disaster-affected areas. The field hospitals are equipped with ambulances, trauma care units, operation theatres. A C-17 Globemaster has also delivered Bailey Bridge, which will help in restoring infrastructure in the cyclone-hit region.
An Indian Air Force C-17 aircraft has just brought a Bailey Bridge to Sri Lanka, which has been handed over to the Sri Lankan authorities by the Indian High Commissioner. This is a prefabricated, rapidly deployable structure crucial for restoring connectivity where bridges have been destroyed because of the aftermath of the Cyclone Ditwah.
We have these Bailey bridges that have been sent, which will be installed at various places where there have been the bridge is in a state of disrepair to restore connectivity. This is first of the heavy lift that we have over the last 4-5 days, and there will be some more that will be coming down the line. This is something that was specifically requested by the President of Sri Lanka of the Prime Minister, and we have been able to deliver it within 48 hours of the request.
The modular bridge can be deployed quickly, enabling access to cut-off communities, speeding up relief operations in interiors of Sri Lanka. India's latest assistance underscores its commitment towards supporting Sri Lanka's recovery, complementing ongoing airlifts of relief material, evacuations and medical aid across the island. Ahmed Moin Farooqi, DD India, Colombo.
Now, the Indian Navy displayed its operational prowess and maritime capabilities through a spectacular operational demonstration in Thiruvananthapuram on Wednesday. The mega event brought alive the Navy's formidable combat capabilities, technological excellence and operational readiness, while reflecting the nation's growing maritime strength and self-reliance. Vishal Barista reports.
150 men, ceremonial guard of honor, was presented to the President of India, the chief guest, upon arrival at Shangumagam Beach, Thiruvananthapuram, where Navy Day was celebrated. Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Dinesh K. Tripathi hosted the President. The operational demonstration featured a thrilling display of coordinated maneuvers by frontline platforms, symbolizing the Navy's ability to deliver power and precision across the maritime spectrum. More than 20 naval ships and submarines, including indigenous aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, along with a formidable array of air assets and elite marine commandos, presented a spectacular display of naval strength and operational excellence. Operation Demo 2025 underscored the Navy's maritime excellence and its steadfast role as a reliable force that inspires confidence, builds partnerships and upholds collective security in the oceans, a role that aligns with India's commitment to a free, open and rules-based maritime order anchored in the vision of Mahasagar.
People of India are grateful to the men and women of Indian Navy for their service to the nation. We are proud of each one of you. On behalf of fellow citizens, I would like to thank all of you for your professionalism, passion and patriotism. I am happy to note that the Indian Navy is choosing various cities for operational demonstration on the Navy Day. It is a welcome step to provide opportunities to the citizens of various parts of the country to witness our Navy's excellence.
The Navy Day marks an important day in the annals of Indian history, commemorating the Indian Navy's defining role in Operation Trident during the 1971 war. Over the decades, Indian Navy has grown from strength to strength, has stood firm and resilient, continuously evolving to meet the emerging challenges to the country's maritime interests.
Navy Day is celebrated on 4th December each year to commemorate the daring and decisive attack of the Indian Navy on and off Karachi Harbour during the 1971 Indo-Pakistan War. This day also offers us an opportunity to pay homage to our brave warriors whose courage and supreme sacrifices continues to inspire us in service of the Navy and the nation.
The event culminated with a beating retreat by Indian Naval Band and traditional sunset ceremony with illumination of naval ships.
Combat ready, cohesive and self-reliant. This is Indian Navy safeguarding the seas for a developed and prosperous Bharat. With cameraman Aniket and Manmohan in Thiruvananthapuram, this is Vishal Baristo for DD India.
That's still to come on DD India Newshour. We'll be speaking with our expert guests on the progress or the lack of it in Moscow on the US plan for peace in Ukraine.
The US launched a bombing campaign against Iran. The Philippines vessel suffered structural damage. The saga of child sexual abuse is the United States China's debt trap strategy. Truth is stranger than fiction. But sometimes hard to uncover. Trust us to tell the truth, unadulterated and pure, of every story that matters to you. You read between the lines, cut the clutter and connect the dots to get you the full picture. Watch Connecting the Dots at these times with me, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Newshour. I'm Gautam Roy. Let's now take you back to our top story, which is all about the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. The US negotiators were there in the Kremlin talking to Vladimir Putin and his team for 5 hours, but there was no breakthrough. And later on, both the Americans and Russians have tried to give the impression that they have made progress and they're ready for more rounds of talks. At the same time, steps are being taken in Europe as well to ensure that things move in a positive direction. Let's talk about it. We have Ambassador Mohun Kumar with us. He's a former senior diplomat joining us from Greater Noida over Zoom. Good evening to you. Ambassador Kumar, what do you make of how these talks went? Initially, it was said very clearly that there was no breakthrough, but the Kremlin came out very clearly saying that there has some progress has been made, some points have been acceptable, others have not, but they're ready for more talks.
Yes, thank you, Gautam, for having me. No, I think to me it seems it confirms two things. That one, the peace process is really a tough one, and this conflict is intractable. It's not easy because there is a combination of historical factors which have been responsible for the conflict and the present situation where there is a stalemate and it has become a war of attrition. The second thing that has happened is we don't know the basis of these negotiations. Initially, you will recall that there was a 28-point proposal put forward by the US. The Russians said they are happy to negotiate on the basis of that. But Ukraine and EU said this draft is totally unacceptable as a basis of negotiation. So that became a 19-point draft. and nobody knows the contents. So I would say, for the benefit of your viewers, that three issues are at stake, three specific issues. One is the territorial aspect of it. How much territory Ukraine has to give up to Russia, in addition to the territory occupied by Russia, so that the conflict comes to an end. Second, we have the question of security. Security not just of Russia, but also security of Ukraine, so that Ukraine does not get invaded again by Russia. So that seems to be the logic, whether Ukraine can have 800,000 troops or more. Can Ukraine be a part of NATO or not? Can it be part of EU? Will there be a multinational, shall we say, a military force to oversee the peace agreement, etc.? Last but not least, I think the issue at stake is also the relationship between US and Russia, and that will involve financial, economic aspects of the agreement, which will enable Russia to join the G7, so that G7 will then become G8. So these are the host of issues, Gautam, and I can see why the negotiations are not easy, because you have parties outside of the conflict. You have the US, you have NATO, and NATO foreign ministers have just met. So you have a host of issues which are interlapping. And that is, I think, a problem in these negotiations. And bear in mind that Russia and Ukraine are not talking to each other directly. It is the US which is practicing shuttle diplomacy, and shuttle diplomacy is always complicated. It's very time consuming.
Yes, and the other player which is not part of the process but is definitely influencing it, is Europe, because of which I guess it was Vladimir Putin who issued out a warning as well to Europe that we don't want war, but if Europe wants it, we're ready for it. What do you make of that?
I think is a tough statement from Putin, unusually tough statement. And that is because Europe has been saying that we cannot negotiate on the basis of a draft which is completely in favor of Russia. So I think Putin also wants to shift the onus of peace onto Europe. Henceforth, hitherto, Russia has been painted by Europe as a party that does not want peace. And this is Putin's way of telling Europe that, listen, I want peace, maybe on my terms, but I want peace. But it is you who are preventing peace from taking place. In other words, what you find is both Europe and Russia, and of course Ukraine, they're all appealing to the US by saying that we are not to blame. Each one is saying, I'm not to blame, it is the other side. And therefore, the United States, which is carrying out these talks in terms of shuttle diplomacy, is being put in an impossible situation. And I think President Trump is gradually coming to realize that this is not an easy conflict to resolve. This is not like the Gaza one, or this is not like the other conflicts that he has claimed he has resolved. I think this is a conflict which is sui generis, it's complex, and as I said, there are historical factors which make a solution very difficult and time-consuming.
Yes, he's described it as a mess, Donald Trump has, but at the same time, there is that factor of what's happened in Pokrovsk, the Russians claiming that they have taken that territory in the Donbass, a key logistics hub. The Ukrainians saying we're still fighting for it, especially we're holding in the north of the city. But we had Ushakov, who was the chief foreign aide, even in these talks for Putin, saying that this did have relevance. You know, our military success on the ground did have relevance in the talks as well with the US negotiators.
There's absolutely no question. You are spot on. I mean, the fact of the matter is Russia cannot lose this war and Ukraine cannot win this war. That is the kind of situation we are facing. There is no way Russia can lose this war given the overwhelming superiority they have in terms of manpower and firepower. And there is also no question that they are making incremental progress. Maybe the Russians are not rolling over Ukraine, that is true, and that might have been the initial expectation, but certainly Russia is making progress. And so as long as President Putin feels that he is winning the war, it is also a negotiating strategy that Russia need not give in immediately, because they are winning the war, if only slowly and incrementally. And I think this makes negotiations that much more difficult.
And Europe has also done two things today. One is moving twin proposals to use the frozen assets of the Russian central bank, which have been lying with Belgium, and the other to cut off or wean itself off the Russian gas supplies by 2027. What sort of a message does that send to Moscow and to the world?
I think it's a tough signaling. It's tough signaling on the part of EU to actually, they've used a very arcane part of their EU charter to use that article and then say that the frozen funds will be used for a reparation loan. This did not enjoy the consensus of all EU member states. Certainly Hungary and Slovakia have not been in favor of this measure, but they have used an emergency measure which is not specifically meant for situations like this. So some European analysts are actually questioning the legality of this measure. But that gives you an idea how keen the EU was to help Ukraine, because bear in mind, Gautam, that the United States has stopped funding Ukraine and the US no longer funds the Ukraine war, and Ukraine needs that money very urgently. And that is why the Europeans have gone to this trouble to actually say that we will fund the war in Ukraine, even though there is no consensus among all the members of the European Union. On the second issue, you are right as well. I think Europe wants to signal to Russia that we are no longer going to be dependent on energy from Russia. They've taken a lot of time doing this. They now buy very little crude oil from Russia. But the latest one is that they are also making a promise that they will completely wean themselves away from gas, from natural gas from Russia in 2027. So it is pretty significant.
Yes.
There is no doubt now that EU does not want to be in a situation as they were 10 years ago, when they were extremely dependent on energy from Russia.
Yeah, but in the meantime, no punitive American tariffs for EU. India's got them, and we have Vladimir Putin coming to Delhi on Thursday. So how do you feel that this particular visit, which is coming, he's coming to Delhi for the first time, to India for the first time after the conflict began. How would that really be shadowed by this issue of Ukraine, the fact that peace is still to be achieved there and the conflict is still raging?
Gautam, geopolitically, I cannot think of a more important visit to India than by the Russian president. Please bear in mind that the Russian president's visit is happening at a time when India and the United States have not yet agreed to a trade deal. That's the first point I want to make. The second point is, we would like to be briefed by the Russian president about the latest moves on the conflict in Ukraine, because India has always conveyed to President Putin through our Prime Minister that this is not an era of war, and that we would like to see the conflict in Ukraine end at the earliest. That's the second. The third, we would also get an idea from President Putin as to how he sees the peace process in Ukraine. And that is important for India to understand. Last but not least, I keep hearing that there will be important defense purchases that India will make from Russia. And that is important for India as well, in terms of India diversifying its defense purchases from many partners. So this visit will be happening under the very, very close monitoring of Western countries, which I think will want to know how there is this body language and what exactly is the outcome of the visit of President Putin to India. That is point number one. Point number two, for India itself, this relationship has assumed importance, as I said, because of the problems that we are having with some of our other partners. So all in all, geopolitically, this visit will be watched very, very closely by analysts and by diplomats all over the world.
Certainly. And on that note, let me end it here and leave room to talk about this key visit for tomorrow and day after. The meat of the visit, of course, day after. Thank you for joining us for the moment, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Let's now take a look at some other stories making news around the world as well. But the government has withdrawn the order mandating pre-installation of cybersecurity app Sanchar Sathi on smartphones by manufacturers in India. The Department of Telecom is removing the order mandating installation of the Sanchar Sathi app following a tenfold jump in voluntary app downloads in just one day. India's Department of Consumer Affairs has mandated that all pan masala packages must display the retail sale price or the RSP and other declarations under the 2011 legal metrology packaged commodities rules. The amendment takes effect on the 1st of February 2026, requiring manufacturers, packers and importers to comply fully. It removes the earlier exemption for packs of 10 grams or less, making RSP and declarations mandatory on all sizes. The proviso under Rule 26A has been replaced with a new one specific to pan masala. The move strengthens consumer protection through transparent pricing and supports the implementation of RSP-based GST on pan masala. Now, day 3 of the winter session of India's Parliament saw smooth transaction of legislative business in both the houses, with Central Excise Amendment Bill passed by the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house, though opposition members staged protests outside Parliament on new labour codes. During the question hour in the Lok Sabha, and the Minister Ashwini Vaishnav termed fake news as a threat to democracy and called on the need to take strict action against fake news and deep fakes. The next report looks at what happened in India's Parliament today.
Justice! India needs justice!
Opposition parties continued their protest for the third day in the winter session, this time against the labour codes, staging demonstrations outside the Parliament. However, proceedings in both houses of Parliament started smoothly in the morning. In the afternoon, Lok Sabha, or the lower house of Indian Parliament, passed the Central Excise Amendment Bill after discussion. The bill gives the government the fiscal space to increase the rate of central excise duty on tobacco and related products after GST compensation cess, which is currently levied on all tobacco products, ceases to exist.
The rates for tobacco and tobacco products, when GST was introduced in 2017, the central government gave up its excise rights, and the duties which were levied under the central excise on tobacco products was given away in favor of the GST Council, so that the Council can levy compensation cess, and that compensation cess which would be collected on tobacco products in the place of excise would go for the compensation for the states for the initial years when they come into the GST. As a result, the central excise duty, the right was kept up. Duties were minimal or completely zero.
Day 3 of winter session of Parliament saw the question hour being transacted in its entirety in both houses. Information and Broadcasting Minister Ashwini Vaishnav said that fake news is a threat to democracy. He stressed on the need to take strict action on fake news and AI-generated deep fakes. Replying to supplementaries during the question hour in the Lok Sabha, Ashwini Vaishnav said a new draft rule has been published to identify and take action against AI-generated deep fakes. INB Minister also highlighted that the government has enacted a very strict law to regulate online money gaming.
Fake news is a threat to our democracy today.
और हमें सोशल मीडिया पर फेक न्यूज़ पर AI जनरेटेड डीप फेक पर स्ट्रिक्ट एक्शन लेने की ज़रूरत है। जिस तरह से सोशल मीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म्स का उपयोग करके एक तरीके से कई ऐसे इकोसिस्टम बन गए जो कि भारत के संविधान को फॉलो नहीं करना चाहते, बहुत तरह से इस पार्लियामेंट द्वारा बनाए हुए कानून को भी पालन नहीं करना चाहते, उसमें स्ट्रिक्ट एक्शन लेने की और कड़े नियम बनाने की वाकई बहुत सख्त जरूरत है।
With the deadlock ending during the winter session of Parliament, both houses saw substantial legislative business on Wednesday. With Kumar Alok, Neeraj Singh, Anuj Yadav's report for DD India.
Indian astronomers have discovered one of the earliest and most beautifully formed spiral galaxies using the James Webb Space Telescope. Named Alaknanda, this Milky Way-like galaxy existed when the universe was just 1.5 billion years old, challenging long-held theories about how quickly galaxies evolved. DD India's Tapas Bhattacharya brings us this report.
Astronomers in India have unlocked a breathtaking secret from the early universe, a massive, perfectly formed spiral galaxy discovered using NASA's James Webb Space Telescope. They have named it Alaknanda, after the Himalayan river, and it's one of the most distant spiral galaxies ever seen. What makes this discovery extraordinary is its age. Alaknanda existed when the universe was just 1.5 billion years old, barely 10% of its current age, and yet it looks strikingly similar to our own Milky Way. Spotted by researchers Rashi Jain and Yogesh Vadadekar from NCRA TIFR in Pune and published in Astronomy and Astrophysics, Alaknanda challenges long-held theories about how galaxies evolve.
Alaknanda is one of the largest, is one of the most distant, large, high stellar mass galaxies, spiral galaxies ever discovered, and we were able to do this using data from the James Webb Space Telescope. Discoveries like Alaknanda challenge existing models of galaxy formation, and we need to now think of the future. What are the implications to models of galaxy formation? And before we do that, we need to gather some additional data. We would like to study how the stars and gas in Alaknanda are moving. Are they moving in an orderly manner, or is the movement of the stars and gas very chaotic?
The galaxies span nearly 30,000 light years, with two beautifully defined spiral arms curving around a bright central bulge. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope JWST infrared vision reveals dazzling star-forming regions along these arms, a beads on a string pattern usually seen in mature nearby galaxies.
Earlier, astronomers used to think that the early universe has to be clumpy, everything should be violent, things should be merging as stable structures like disk and properly rotating, in which spiral arms can develop, cannot really form. But we have found one of them, and that is why this discovery is very important, because we now really have to revisit the models of galaxy formation.
Until now, scientists believed early galaxies were chaotic, turbulent, and too unstable to form such ordered structures so soon. But Alaknanda tells a different story, one where the early universe was far more mature than we imagined, a milestone discovery and a proud moment for Indian astronomy. Tapas Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
Let's now talk about sports, where Indian fast bowler Mohit Sharma has announced his retirement from all formats of cricket, officially ending a career which lasted nearly 14 years. Mohit, who made his international debut in 2013, represented India in 26 ODIs and 8 T20 internationals, finishing with 37 wickets across different formats. He was also part of India's squad, which reached the semi-finals of the 2015 ICC Men's ODI World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Domestically, Mohit featured consistently for Haryana throughout his career. Barcelona secured a crucial 3-1 victory over Atletico Madrid at the Camp Nou on Tuesday, but celebrations were dampened by Dani Olmo's injury. The Spanish midfielder scored Barcelona's second goal before falling awkwardly on his shoulder, immediately signalling distress. Manager Hansi Flick was forced to substitute him, and reports from Sport confirm Olmo will miss the remainder of the year. While the win strengthens Barca's campaign, losing Olmo is a significant setback as they prepare for a demanding run of fixtures. Team India unveiled their new jersey for the T20 World Cup 2026 during the innings break of the second ODI against South Africa in Raipur. Former captain Rohit Sharma, the tournament's brand ambassador, and young batter Tilak Verma revealed the fresh design. The World Cup, co-hosted by India and Sri Lanka, begins on the 7th of February with a final on the 8th of March. Suryakumar Yadav's side will open their campaign against the USA in Mumbai, aiming to make a strong statement in front of home fans. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India News Hour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS. Just scan the QR code on the screen and download the app right away. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.